Dystopia tonight. Dystopia tonight.
How are you? It was a little crazy. I was like, and I've got Facebook pictures of her.
I'm like,
that she doesn't know. Yeah, exactly.
This is why I left Facebook, John, because of people like you.
It's so weird though, because I only stumbled upon those. I was like going through, I have like hard drives filled of like photos of me and my friends or whatever, and I don't know what to do with because nobody looks at photo albums anymore. And there's just like, you know, me and my friends in our early 20s and also like from like high school and shit. I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? And then I found just weird random like screenshots of like Facebook stuff, and two of them were posts that you made, and I was like, holy shit. But they're really not, they're very inspiring. I'll bring them up later, but I love them. Cool. I thought they were nice.
Awesome. Can't wait to see how smart I was.
Oh god, I know. It's kind of like a weird thing when somebody brings up something that you wrote a while ago on a social media platform. You're like, none of this is good.
You know, but what does surprise me is sometimes I read stuff that I've written and I'm like, who wrote this? This is really good. Like, yes. When did that come out of me?
Yeah.
That's what makes the creative process so interesting, because there's some channel in here that just knows way more than our kind of limited thinking self. And
right.
It always gives me hope, like, oh, I could do that again, because I clearly didn't remember doing it the first time, so it must still be possible.
Yeah. Do you think it's like the immediacy of the thing you're thinking about plus the passion you have for it at the time, and like being able to channel it through that?
Yeah, I think there is this, you know, channeling is a weird word for it, but I think creativity is, it's coming from a place in your mind that's bigger than your ego. Your ego is your conscious self. And all of creativity, you know, if you're writing a project or working on something, you know that it's writing back here during parts of the day when you're like driving or you're going to eat lunch or you're making lunch or you're doing stuff like this. Right. If you're working on a project, it's always here. So it's some part of the psyche that, you know, is just in motion, working on it over there. And then it comes into consciousness and then it dumps down into the pen. And, you know, all of a sudden you've written this paragraph and you're like, wow, I had that to say today. I didn't know that was even going to come. Amazing.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Did you use that as a tool, do you think, maybe? Like, because I know I've either justified expressing rage on the internet as a tool for writing, which I think I did that a little too much. But like, there has been times where I'm like, oh my God, I think I put that in a way. It's weird because I feel like when you post something and somebody has something else to say about it, it checks your own bullshit in a way. But at the time, it can also reinforce your belief in that thing, because if I feel like if it's weak, you have nothing to counteract it with. But if it's a strong belief, it makes you think about it in a different way and then write stronger.
Yeah, there's so many different things that go on. I mean, Twitter taught me how to write a joke. I'd never been a joke writer. I wasn't a comedian or anything like that, but it taught me in 140 characters back in the day how to be really concise with my language, which is really what joke writing is about, right? It's about putting things in the right order with the right rhythm and the right thing, surprising the person at the end. And that was really fun to learn how to do that. And I think with social media, there's like all different ways we do it. And I think some things we should not be sharing on social media, if it's especially if it's creative work. You know, if you're still working on some stuff. I know people used to test jokes on there and stuff, and I think that's an okay way to go. I mean, with a comic, but you know, I also think that there's always a precious time if you're writing something more personal that should not be out there and letting people put their fingerprints all over it.
Right.
You know, or even hear it and see it. So, you know, it's, you know, but it is what it is. And yeah, of course it is a great bullshit checker too, you know, because sometimes I'll tweet something or whatever, and then someone like will come back at me and I'll like, oh yeah, I didn't really think that through, did I? Thank you.
Exactly.
Letting me think that through, and I will amend in the future at some point.
Yeah.
But also the one thing I hate about social media is it doesn't let us be human and kind of have those moments. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to jam down your throat. And it's like, geez, would you do that to me in a conversation if we were sitting at a table and I said something a little half-assed? Really?
Yeah.
John would. I wouldn't.
Okay. Good to know.
No, what I was
Good to know.
No. The
Good to
craziest
know.
thing is that it allows everybody to seem like their response is immediate, because your thing that you posted hangs there forever.
Yes.
And everybody else gets to look at it, let it gestate, and then
contemplate. Yeah.
and then they form this fully formed, thoughtful opinion, but it looks like it's immediate. And you're like, well, fuck, makes me look like I didn't think about shit. But this guy over here. I love now that Twitter's gotten so out of control that people like literally, like, it is supposed to be such a short medium, 140 or 160 characters, but they're like, they finish writing what they're writing and they put one. And then it's like 1 of 38. And you're like, well, I don't want to fucking read.
They added the little plus thing. So you're like, add another tweet. And then one day I was doing kind of a longer one like that because I'm one of those people. And they were like, would you like to look at our, I don't even know what they called it. It was like some other kind of thing that you could, like not a blog post, but something like our newsletter feature. And I'm like, newsletter feature? Yeah. No, I'm not writing a newsletter on Twitter.
I know.
I mean, maybe I am, but thanks, but no thanks.
It reminds me of like, there's not a, it's so weird because the internet is so unique at times, but oftentimes very homogenous. And the same with like, I remember when I was a kid and I worked at the mall and like things started, like I worked at a bookstore and I worked at Suncoast Video, not to brag. But I did the two little, just, humble brag there. But I did the two. And then I remember like, towards the end when all that shit was closing down, they had one last go at surviving. And it was like, well, we're a bookstore, but we're also going to sell a rack of DVDs. And it'd be like, no, you can't do that. Like, and that's what Twitter tends to do too, where they're like, we'll make stuff longer. You have videos now. And it's like, just be a thing.
Just be a thing. Like, stop being TikTok or Instagram and those things on the top of my Twitter feed. I still have not looked at one of them and will not do it. A fleet. I will not do a fleet. And really, they called it a fleet.
Yeah, yeah, they did. They called
it a fleet.
It's
It's the name of a goddamn enema person, people.
Didn't even think of that. That's so true.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So I didn't even ask how you are. How are you? You doing all right?
I'm good. I've been super busy.
Awesome.
And that's great. And my brain is a little fried from it all, but I've been in a really generative, creative space the last 2 months, which has been amazing. And always fun to be, we were just talking about that, in that flow of like, oh, shit's coming through me. Quick, get the pen. It's coming out. In fact, it was coming out so big that I had like big newspaper pads and like writing in big Sharpies and stuff. And yeah, it was good. It was really good. So it's been really wonderful, and about to go in a couple of weeks to Jamestown and Chautauqua to visit the National Comedy Center.
Nice. Oh, I haven't been. I wanted to go.
Oh, yes. And to do our week of comedy at Chautauqua inside of their programming. We're doing a week. Wow. And that'll be fun. And so, yeah, I'm excited to actually travel and get there and to see Jamestown again. I miss it. It's been, didn't get to go last year. So yeah. Visit my dad's stuff, literally.
Yeah. Oh, is that kind of surreal for you to go there and have to and see all that stuff just kind of laid out there?
It's all surreal. If it's never not surreal, I think I might worry a little bit. I even tweeted about it last night that I was watching Hacks and they name dropped my dad. And I said, I'm still the giddy kid who like goes, oh my God, they just said my dad's name, and it's like, and I like awesome. And I said to my husband, he's famous because there's like a part of me like that's just like, he's my dad and this is my life or whatever. And then it's like, suddenly you're just watching a TV show and there's a goddamn picture of him on a wall in a comedy thing. And then someone says his name and you're like, that's fucking weird. That's weird.
Yeah, it's got to be incredible. That's awesome that you still have that kind of like childlike, view of it, though. That's incredible.
I think my dad did too. He was a person who he was never cynical about any of that and was always fascinated by celebrity, not his own celebrity, not like fascinated with that part. But I know, like, when I went to school, like I mentioned earlier, I went to high school with Ed Asner's daughter and a bunch of Hollywood kids. I went to this place called Crossroads, which was Hollywood Central. And I'd come home and have some kids, and I'd say to my dad, "Oh, that's what such and such's son or daughter." And my dad would be like, "Really? Wow." He was like, "That's so cool."
Oh, that's awesome.
He was starstruck. He was a starstruck kid too.
There's an interview I remember. I must have been in high school, but I saw with Jon Stewart and your dad.
Yes.
And
it was an HBO special. Yeah, it was. I was at the comedy festival there. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, and it was cool because the way he talked about celebrity and kind of wanting to perform and wanting to do that. He did have a very childlike view of it then too. And he's like, he liked being the center of attention, and he liked the older people would say, "Isn't he cute?" It was all kind of just like, living outside yourself and being amazed by the whole process, which actually was kind of cool because, sometimes you hear these people and celebrities kind of talk about what they do, and it is very cynical, and it is very kind of like, yeah, no big deal, like, or whatever. And he seemed to love it.
Yeah, he did love it. And he also, I think it was always a big deal for him because he was that starstruck kid. And his big hero was Danny Kaye. And he, saw Danny Kaye on the big screen and said, "I want to be him one day," and that was his plan, was I'll become a DJ and then a stand-up and then I'll become Danny Kaye. And he sat out, he was about 9 or 10 years old. He'd take the bus to Midtown and downtown, and he'd go to all the theaters and big jazz clubs and sit outside and get autographs from like all the great jazz artists and stuff. He was, a kid in the 40s and the early 50s. And he waited outside for hours for Danny Kaye and in the rain, and Danny Kaye ignored every single kid who was waiting there for him. Wow. And my dad vowed that if he ever got famous, he would never walk by a person who wanted an autograph or to say hello or something. And he really, he kept to that. He always honored that no matter what, no matter where he was. And I always thought that was a really human, great thing because, you're someone's idol and don't fuck it up.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's incredible. And that speaks to literally anybody I know, whether they've been doing stand-up for 30, 40 years or like, me about my age or whatever, who's met your dad, said he was super kind, took the time out, especially if they were a comedian. Yep. I think Liz Mealy, I know she told me a bunch of stuff about him. And then, another friend of mine who had met him and got to work with him and stuff, just, couldn't have been nicer. That always makes me feel good because it's like you have these idols or whatever, and you never get to. I was always a little afraid to meet like stand-ups that I had known when I was a kid. But then when you hear that they're awesome people, you're just like, well, that fucking makes me feel like amazing. I've had a good run with like opening for like national headliners stuff where they've been pretty cool. Only one, I feel like it was just a bad day, but like literally I got to the green room and the door was closed and I'm like, am I not allowed to? And they were like, and I was like, I'll just hang in the kitchen. It's fine.
Yeah. But, I had an experience at an event that was honoring my dad and met someone, and and this person meant a lot to me. They were like kind of my George Carlin, and they were just, I think, just maybe incapable of connecting on that level. Right. And and the moment it was a little jarring, but then I was like, yeah, everyone's got their thing and everyone's a human being. And have heard from other people that this person is generally like that. So I was like, okay, all right. So it wasn't me and it wasn't this, and but it is always a little shocking when you're like, oh,
yeah.
But that took a lot from you to be able to realize that and be like, all right, they're not just an asshole. They're just not able to connect with people on this level for probably their own reasons.
Yeah, I think I have pretty intense empathetic skills, and it was, I can read a person pretty well, and it was like, okay, some part of them just is not present.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of like that sometimes when you meet people. It's funny too because you don't assume that, because when they're on stage, that's their moment to turn on.
Yes.
And then you don't realize that literally every other part of their life is just off. And you're like, oh, that's got to be a hard way to live.
Yeah.
I feel like people don't expect me to be like, I found that like just from being a comic or whatever, and for as long as I've been doing it, they don't expect me to be approachable. And then when they find out that I genuinely just like to talk, and I don't shut up, they're like, this is a little too much. Like, we kind of prefer the distant ones. And I'm like, hey, are we all going somewhere? What's going on? They're like, we're really good. We just wanted a photo and a fuck you.
You know, and that's so funny too, because some comics have kind of prickly stage personas.
Yeah.
And I was like really like always nervous about meeting them and stuff. And then I meet them, you know, backstage or in the green room or something like that. And they're just like a ball of gush, like, hi, nice to meet you. And you're like, what? Wait, huh? What? Huh? Gotta figure this one out. Gotta line this up now. Okay.
Yeah. Bill Burr is one of those dudes I met.
Yes.
I always, I had a feeling you were thinking.
Yes.
I was like, because when I you know, you see him.
Terrified of
me too. Me too. And then when I met him, he couldn't have been nicer. And my brain was like,
and thoughtful and smart and lovely. And
Yep. It was also like that, like when I was super young when I met Colin Quinn for the first time. We were backstage at Caroline's.
Yeah.
But again, I assumed he was on a, you know, whatever, and wanted to know what I was doing, if I was talk to me the entire time. And not only that, talk to me like had been doing it forever, because I told him, I think at the time, I'll never forget, I was like, yeah, I've started at Rascals in New Jersey or whatever. And then he was like, oh yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that place closed down. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, the guy got caught and like, we went into this whole conversation, and for like half a second, I forgot that I was nobody.
You know, what's so great about that though, is that finding, you know, this hierarchy thing we do, right, where we put these people above us, and then we find out that, oh, really, we're just in some sort of a peer group with each other, and they may have more time on a stage or this or that, but you know, being a stand-up comedian is, you know, there's a lot more of them than there were 40 years ago. You know, I mean, it's insane how many more there are. Yeah. But still, it's a small percentage of the population that actually really, you know, especially paid comedians who gets up on a stage and gets paid for it, you know. And there's just so much automatic understanding in that kind of a subculture. And there's something about when you realize you're in the peer group, and you'd start to look at yourself differently too. Like, oh, I'm able to do this, and I'm just a human being, and that person's actually a human being, and they're able to do it too. So, okay.
Yeah, it's nice to let that kind of guard down and just kind of, I feel like it relieves a lot of like unnecessary tension just in your performance and everything else too. I remember, did you know Carl Above?
No.
He was Sam Kinnon's best friend. He just passed away actually recently, a few months ago, but I knew him when I was younger. He let me open for him and stuff. And he was nice to me when I moved out to LA, and, you know, had me come to the Comedy Store or whatever. And then, but I remember me, him, and another comic, somebody who's not doing it anymore, but we were just talking about comedians and basically what you just said. It's a very unique experience to have. And Carl was doing this corporate gig, and it was dudes that were, I mean, flying in private jets, and they're, you know, whatever. But the line to meet him after he performed for them was so crazy ridiculous. And it's because he had experiences that none of these other dudes had.
Yeah.
No matter how rich you are, no matter whatever, a comic is a very unique, it blew my mind when I was younger, because I was like, I didn't quite understand it. And then after seeing that, I was kind of like, holy shit, it really is a singular thing.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, I always think about that, and I'm just like, oh my god, that's so fucking. Because every now and then I'm just like, why would anybody care?
I think it's a healthy thought, also. You know, like, right? For any of us, like, really, why? Yeah. You know, does it really matter in the end? You know, but you got to be able to get out of bed in the morning and have some meaning in your life, you know, so you got to construct that meaning. But I think it's very healthy also to be like, yeah, like my dad would say, you know, like, yeah, in the end, you know, the planet's just going to shake us off, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
we're all worm food. Yeah.
In the end, we are. Oh, well.
I love that you acknowledge that, though, that there is that threshold of like, what does it matter to? I'm not leaving this bed ever. I've had like a million times
I mean, over. You know, there is that question of like, well, am I living today or am I dying today? Like, it's kind of a big, it's a big question. Yeah. It's, you know, and I'm a kind of, not so much anymore, but for a long time and decades, anxiety, depression girl, right? So, staying in bed for 5 days and disappearing was an option for sure.
Yep.
And now I get that is kind of just like a saying, like, no to life. Like, yeah, I'm not going to participate anymore. And, you know, part of what's changed for me and just, you know, in general is just my parents dying, like that. That'll wake you up in a good way. Like, oh shit, death's a thing. Like, it really actually fucking happens. It's not an idea in my head anymore. These people I know, and they're not here. So that like wakes you up. And it's like, you know, you really do see, like, even on the shittiest day, I'm still a privileged white woman who lives in America. Like, and I hit the lucky sperm club too. So
the lucky sperm club.
Yeah, that's what my friend calls it, the lucky sperm club. If you like are born into the lucky sperm club, and acknowledging it, like, that's privilege, I guess, is the lucky sperm club. But and so it's like, so I'm having a shitty day and I acknowledge that, or I have emotions or whatever. Of course, I'm kind to myself, and let's get on with it. Like, what's you know, what do I get to do today? Because it's all it's all a privilege to be here.
Right. It's a great way to look at it too, because I've known, like, I've dealt with the same thing with depression, where, I mean, there's been a 3-year span where, like, and I remember the three years exactly when they were or whatever, but I was like, where the fuck did they go? Oh yeah, you were sad as shit and did not, you know, and tried to pull myself out of it, but it's just super fucking hard. But the same way, I feel like that's a coping mechanism, right? To tell yourself, what can I do today, as opposed to whatever. Did it take you some time to learn that, or was it something that grew stronger the more you applied it?
I think it's a mature, just a growing up also. And there's clinical depression where there's chemicals that are really keeping you from being able to access something else. But the kind of psychology I studied, which is Jungian psychology, the way we hold depression also is that it is a communication from your larger psyche, right? And in some ways there is, there is a season for everything, right? And sometimes there's a season for a lot of activity and a lot of striving and a lot of grabbing and going and energy. And sometimes I think this life needs to be like, I need to disappear and maybe recalibrate a little bit, and no one wants 3 years of their lives to do that. But sometimes it takes that. It takes the time it takes. And so, we try not to pathologize the depression so much. And I think for me, really what it was that I wasn't honoring what I really wanted to do in my life. And so I was just tapping out, like, if I don't get to, if I'm not, and I wasn't capable yet of really going for what I wanted. Right. So I think I felt kind of, stuck, a bit stuck, and so, and it's so unique and individual for so many people. But I now know that I can also, which I didn't really buy into before, but I also know I can choose differently. Like, I can have a shitty morning and then I can do a reset and say, you know what? I'm just going to start over and I'm going to have a decent afternoon and begin again. And I used to be really ruled by my moods. And I've learned that moods are created by thoughts. And we get to choose our thoughts. Beautiful. Yeah. I know a lot of people who follow that kind of thing, where if one thing happens, no matter at what point of the day, the rest of that fucking day is ruined. So if something shitty happens in the morning, they think the whole day is gone. Yeah. And I've never that I feel like that's not the way, like, my depression usually works if I feel like I don't have a window out of, like, being stuck. Yes. Like, if I'm cycling through shit, which I'm always thinking about stuff, but if my brain hits a wall and then goes, fuck, that's weird, we're going to circle back and try to get it out again. And if it's always there, then I, like, freak out and can't handle, like, I feel like there's no way out. Yeah. I like the Jungian. Do you, I always love the personality test. Do you do you believe in that kind of thing? The typologies and stuff. Yeah.
I'm an ENFP.
Oh, nice. I am an ENFJ.
ENFJ.
Okay. ENFJ. But I'm right 50-50 on the E and the I.
Okay.
Which is interesting for me, which means I feel crazy half the time. I'm like, leave me alone. No, please, let's go hang out. But I really figured out during the pandemic, I am a bit more introverted than I thought I was. I was really enjoying the introverted part of it. And I think all of us kind of got in touch with our introversion.
Oh yeah.
So
I like being an. I mean, I'm primarily an extrovert, but over the years, like in my 20s, there was nothing keeping me inside. I had like such a large group of friends that was like, if this particular section of that group wasn't available, then I would drive an hour and a half down to wherever the fuck.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would do it that way. And now, like even so, the pandemic, I liked. Well, I think I learned to be. I think I was forced to learn to be alone. Like I think when I moved out to like LA and stuff like that, I just didn't know anybody. I didn't have anybody. So of course, you do the air mattress and then no air conditioning, and if that isn't exactly the right setup to kill yourself, like there's no. Like, I think I was talking to Gary Goldman and I was telling him about going to LA when I was super depressed. He was like, "No,
dude."
I was like, "I know it's the worst time to do it."
Lonely city here, man.
I did not see that coming. But yeah.
Well, but you know what I learned about the extroversion introversion, which is the way you figure that out is how do you get rejuvenated and replenished? And if you get rejuvenated and replenished by being around people, then you're an extrovert. If you need some cave time to get rejuvenated and replenished, it means you're more of an introvert. And that's me. I definitely need my cave time. And I think extroversion was something I learned to be in order to kind of function in the world and survive and to, as we all do as kids, we learn strategies, right, to get through the chaos part. And I meet all my performer friends, people who are monologists or stand-ups. They need to be in front of an audience 6 nights a week. And I'm like, if I'm in front of an audience once every 2 months, I'm good.
Yeah. I understand that. I can relate to that. I love, like, the pandemic was a little too long to not be, because it was weird timing because I'd just gotten off the road. So I was out in LA and then went, did the Midwest and then came back. And then literally the last day before they told everybody that if you're in New York, you have it, and we're locking everything down, was the day I was in New York and then got back to Jersey. And then they were like, you might have it. And I was like, wow. Cool. But I didn't mind in the bit. Like I had to question certain things or I tried to in the beginning, because I was like, I seem to function better when the world's ending.
Well, gee, I don't know. Your show is called Dystopia tonight. There's just a little clue in that,
right?
You function well with chaos. It's and a lot of us do. I mean, we were trained well.
Yeah, and I also felt like useful for a change, because my friends who had not been inside or dealt with or forced to be whatever, they were like, I don't know what's going on. I'm like, oh, you're sad. Let me help you.
This is an emotion. Let me explain it to you.
Exactly. I was like, I got this. We could work through this.
This is awesome.
And I was just, I mean, again, like by like month 4 or 5, when I realized we weren't getting out of it anytime soon, I was
ready to kill each other.
Oh yeah. Like the 9 o'clock hour would hit, and I would just, anybody that was online, I'd be like, hey, where are you from? Like, just, they're like, are you all right? I was like, no, I'm not.
No,
having a thing. Do you feel like, what's crazy though? Like, even with Twitter is, to me, other than people who use it professionally or whatever, I feel like it's a giant mental health issue for the most part that's just unchecked. But I also feel like, because what was it? Was it the 60s or 70s where they used to wear those buttons that were like, I'm okay, you're okay? Was that a thing?
That was a thing. That was a book. Yeah.
Yes. I feel like that almost happens now, and I kind of just want to be like, I'm okay, you're okay, that's okay, but only for a bit. I feel like I want to add that, because I feel like people have really just, and they're not working on themselves, because I always try to be like, I don't want to feel this way. I want to get out of feeling this way. I want to be a functioning member of society and feel things or whatever. And I feel like there's a lot of people who just pull back and go, no, I just don't go out, and I don't see people, and I don't do that. I have friends who can't order food because they don't like talking on the phone, and I want to be like, that's easily remedied. It's, but they're like, no, I just don't do that. And I'm like, and they won't order unless it has an app.
And their world gets to be about that big, you know,
Yes.
and they're missing out on 99% of life
Yeah.
over a fear, which is all constructed
Right.
in their head, you know. Yeah, it's definitely a huge mental health issue. Yeah, Twitter's interesting. I'm lucky for the most part. I don't get a lot of that, and
That's good.
but I think social media, you know, because we're not in each other's presence and we're just kind of saying whatever comes to our mind, we're basically talking to ourselves out loud in front of millions of people, but we don't have to be in their presence, so we don't have to honor the social code of being in each other's presence, which there's a lot that goes on when you're in someone's presence about, you know, I'm not dangerous, I'm okay. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of cues that go on.
Good point.
And we don't get that. We just get this writing. And then it, if we read something and it kind of resonates with some kind of more primal or more fucked up part of ourselves, and we're like, oh, okay, mirror, someone's mirroring that. Okay. And then that just gets a voice. And then before you know it, you know, you're in your victimhood, or you're in your rage, or you're in your whatever it is. And so I really, like, you know, at the beginning, I'd be like, yeah, you get triggered into stuff like, oh yeah, let's all jump onto that bandwagon. Let's all jump onto that. And it's just one big bandwagon. And so now this is where mindfulness and conscious action comes in. It's like you feel the urge, you're like, yeah, let's pile on this shit. And then you're like, no, because in 2 hours, you're going to feel like shit for piling on someone else. And you're going to have to deal with all the crazies that are on, quote unquote, the side of the pylon. And then you have to deal with all the crazies who are on the side of the thing you're piling on. And now you're going to want to have a more nuanced conversation, which is impossible on social media because it can only be black and white. So I just learned after a couple of those episodes to just pull away, put the phone down, breathe, going to put the phone down, not going to react to that. If I care about an issue or something, I will find a way to be an activist with that issue. You know, bitching about it or piling on Twitter is not an activist action. It's just not.
I completely agree. And it took me a bit of time to adjust to what to do and what is and isn't. Like, I wanted to have a voice. I do have a voice. I can do whatever I want on stage. I can do whatever I want when I'm on TV or radio or whatever. And then the internet makes things a little bit more complicated, but at the same time, you know, there's a way to engage where you can pull away from something that you like. You can just leave a post and go, this is my opinion, and fucking walk away.
Yeah, walk away. Or on Twitter now you have the option of like, you don't get to comment on this.
Yes, exactly. I just recently turned Facebook comments off. They're public and nobody can fucking comment. And I think that's the better solution too, because for the most part, one, it makes everybody seem famous. And when everybody seems to have a platform, you're yelling at your 75-year-old aunt who has no sway because in your fucked up internet brain, you think that this is an opinion that is worth tearing down when you're like, we just had dinner and she seemed fine then. And plus she's going to give us the house eventually. So let's everybody just calm down. But I've been that, you know, I've been sucking into that too. And recently the other thing that happened to me especially over the pandemic, man, it was these, there were a couple Instagram accounts that were like curating, as they do, comedians material and shit like that. And I've got I've always been politically active. I've gone to protests and all that other shit and been detained by Secret Service. That was fun. That was I was 19 and it was the second Bush thing.
I was a crazy young man.
Would literally do the same thing today.
Second Bush. I don't know who wasn't interviewed by the Secret Service during that Bush term.
Exactly. Yeah. I still have the paper and I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's good times. But yeah, these accounts are like curating comics material or whatever. And for a while they started making money and I was like, you can't fuck it. But they had a large number of followers and also celebrity followers, which I'm like, how hard is it to fool a celebrity? But like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, first I was like, that's impressive. And then I was like, relax. But I was like, that's fucked up. Like, that's really annoying. And then I was like, well, your message is getting out there. Shut up. And then at the same time, I was like, but do I want the fucking money from this shit? Like,
Yeah,
it was weird.
It's complicated.
It is. It's like,
Yeah.
it's the capitalism, you know, it's always interfering in some way or another. And
I mean, we have to eat and pay rent, damn it.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I was like, literally the comic in me was like, I fucking want my money for that t-shirt. It's like,
oh yeah.
We
spent a lot of time trying to shut people down who want to borrow my dad's likeness and stuff. And there's so many t-shirts out there. And we, like, after a while, we just kind of, we thought we were going to tackle YouTube at one time. And I'm like, guess what? We're not. It's got 1 million hits. Yay. It's all new fans.
Right.
There's 2 generations that have discovered my dad since he died 13 years ago because of YouTube.
Crazy.
So, and people all over the world. My dad, that was the most amazing. That was when social media was great. Those first my dad died in 2008, like 2008 to 2011, Facebook and Twitter were these like amazing places. And I was getting every day, I'd get a DM or a message or something from someone like, hey, I'm in Iran and I discovered your dad. I'm in China. I'm in Russia. I'm in, and I'm like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that this is happening. And that's the good thing about it, and if you own intellectual property, it's tough.
Oh, yeah. Do you ever see, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to ask, because YouTube, I find it such a funny animal. So they don't demonetize the people that are using your dad's.
They do now. Yeah. We finally we got in the right situation where we had someone sign us up for that. Like, don't let people do that.
Yeah.
Shut them down, so we can do that. And so that has been helpful, but
that's good. So hopefully now, if they have I hope they have 10 million hits, because that all should get rerouted to you at that point, right? If you have in the right catalogs.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So tough, right? Because it's art. So you go art is such a tough medium, because I feel like comedic art is different than like a painting, because now they feel like people have been pirating the word, like, the spoken word like crazy.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy. I mean, especially with all these my friends would ask me all the time, because I would get a meme or something like that stolen where they would literally just crop out my name or like take the thing, and I'd find them and go after them, and they'd be like, why do you bother? I'm like, I don't know exactly why I bother, but also because it's mine. I did a thing, and they could at least just give me credit. It's so weird.
I think my dad was that way too. Like, people were always attributing this
I've seen that.
Horrible
something in time. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, always attributing it to him because it was Carlin-esque sounding. And he just finally put a thing on his website, like front page, like, this is not my thing, and stop telling people it is. So he was like, he was doing the opposite, like distancing himself from a bad email meme thing. And then I would have fun on Facebook, though. There was about 3 George Carlin Facebook groups, and I think I ran one of them. And this is before I got sick of all of this and left Facebook. But and I remember someone showing me a meme where they had taken my dad's whole thing about the ownership of America and removed the word business and put in the word government. So it was a conservative group who turned his words around.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, and his whole thing was like, the politicians are owned by the businessmen.
Yes.
The businessmen are the fucked up ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they turned it all around on themselves. And so I just went into the Facebook group and I'm like, here's what's going on over in the Heritage Foundation group or whatever it is. Here's the meme. Go do what you need to do. And like 200 George Carlin fans descended on this like Heritage Foundation group and just tore them 200 new assholes. Wow. It was so great. And I was like, for a moment, I was like, I am Empress Kelly. I have minions that will go far and wide to defend my father's great honor and reputation. It was very heady for about 10 minutes. But you know, but then in the end, it's also, I'm like you, it's like, I can't chase everything down.
Right.
I can't correct everybody. But I did take a little effort during the Trump era to correct people, a lot of libertarians who love my dad and stuff like that. And I just wanted to correct them that no, he would not be fond of Donald Trump. He is the epitome
New York white businessman, narcissist. I mean, like right down the line.
Yeah.
No empathy, the whole thing. I was like, no, this is like the person this was like the Antichrist to my father. Like,
Yeah.
you don't get that by watching his material, really?
I know. People have such a warped fucking view. That's the thing, and it's crazy too because there's so much out there about your dad, and just video clips, stuff like that. It's like, how do you misrepresent what somebody says when there's so much material about what they've said?
Confirmation bias. We hear what we want to hear, and it fits our preconceived notions.
True.
So that's what's fascinating about that. It's like, oh, I see you twisted that to make yourself feel better about that. Okay,
I know.
But letting you know it's not what he meant.
Are you ever surprised like how well some of the stuff, like there was a clip of him on Bill Maher's show, not the politically incorrect, but Real Time, and it's him and I cannot remember who the politician is because I don't care, but he was really going on about the businesses and stuff like that and who the government is run by, whatever. But it's amazing because it holds up. So I mean, it's sad because it holds up. Because you're like, wow, nothing's changed. But it's like he saw it in so many different ways back then. Does it ever just surprise you or you're like, no, like that makes total sense to me?
I think his gift was always blowing our minds. Like we would see the new special. However we did that, I would go to my dad wouldn't show me any of his material before the new special. He wanted me to be in the audience and experience it like an audience member. Wow. And there was always one or two moments in the special where your brain would go, yep. He would fucking put in a perspective that you could barely wrap your head around. And it was such a unique way of looking at things. Mm-hmm. And I think because he was so good at that, particularly around the cultural stuff, that it doesn't surprise me that all of this, that how prophetic he was, and that it certainly doesn't surprise me that, his audience was a certain percentage of the population, a small one. People knew his name and things like that, and would watch him on Carlin or Leno or whatever it was, or maybe they knew him from Class Clown and that kind of stuff. But so his hardcore fans who really believed in him and followed his logic are, people who are kind of a certain level of developmental thinking. Mm-hmm. And the majority of the population is not at that level.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that we are still struggling with all of this, and even more so. It is humanity too. We are, what he was speaking in some ways were perennial wisdoms. The reason that there were the 7 deadly sins is because all of those things are our Achilles heel as human beings.
Right.
We are hardwired to kind of be fuck ups.
Yes.
And so we're still being fuck ups, and we've progressed a lot for 2,000 years, but we're still dealing with rage and greed and power over each other and hoarding and, all this stuff. So, it's in a different kind of category, but it's still the same impulses that we have to all individually check and collectively check.
Right. I love that you said we're all still fuck ups, because it brings me to the thing. One of the screenshots. I think about this all the time, by the way. And I said this. I fucking shit you not. I said this too. You have no reason to believe me, but I did. As in spite of how much I emphasize it by saying I shit you not. But you posted something on Facebook. I think it got to be like 5-6 years ago. And it's I'll read it real quick. But it's perfectionism kills. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I think about this a lot. Good. And it's basically just perfectionism kills. It kills dreams. It kills adventures. It kills the joyful participation in life. Hell, it kills all participation in life. Life is a call and response game. Living life is participating in the call and response. Body hungers, you eat. Child cries, you soothe. A city gets hit by a hurricane, you help. You have a vision of a scene between a father and son, and you write a play. But with perfectionism, we set out to interrupt the natural call and response cycle. We refuse the call, we fear the call, we ignore the call. Our perfectionism says I can't respond because I'll get my hands dirty, I'll take too much time, people will think I'm crazy or ugly or stupid or not good enough. not good enough. I think about that constantly, and I love that you basically. It was like I had saved that for so long, and it really. I wish it was like a message that is that in one of your books, or is that in a book, or
no,
you just posted
I wrote it. I wrote an essay about it. I had a podcast that I did very often. I'm about to rebrand it and move on from it, but it's called Waking from the American Dream. All my shows are up there. And one year, I think it was year 3 or 4 of the podcast, I needed to challenge myself, and I decided I needed to write a little essay for each episode, a little 150 to 250 word essay. And so I wrote one called Perfectionism Kills, and it's a little piece from that essay.
Wow. Oh, I mean, I'm going to have to find the whole essay because I like that. It was something that I couldn't at the time. I think I felt, and obviously agreed with when you posted it. I stole it and saved it forever. But it crystallizes that feeling so fucking well, and then kindly explains it away and reasons why you should not listen to it. And it's so bizarre. My friend is going through some shit right now and just hesitant about her own creativity and path or whatever. And I quoted that. I was like, I'm gonna say something to you, and you're gonna want to hold on to it, and it blew her fucking mind.
Awesome.
So was that? So you did that specifically for that episode? Was that something that you've been thinking? Because I would love to know, like, how in your own path you came to that conclusion yourself.
Yeah, I had spent decades not being a creative because of my perfectionism. My standard was, if 10,000 people aren't stomping their feet and chanting my name, I have not succeeded. That'll fuck you up.
Yep, absolutely. Oh my God.
So I had this weird extra fear around living up to that standard in my head, and believing that that's the standard I had to live up to out in the world, because everyone was going to be whispering behind their back, you know who that is. And so it fucks you up if you let that be the thing that rules you. And so as I started performing more and was doing my solo show that Paul Provenza directed with me and helped me develop and create, I had to learn to fail in public. I had to learn to fail on stage, just like stand-ups do every night.
Yeah.
And I'd never let myself fail. I was a kid who was rescued by my parents all the time. And then I just did things that came really easily to me so that I never would fail. But the things I really longed to do, like get on a stage and speak my truth and tell my stories, I didn't quite know how to do that. And I didn't understand the creative process was about, successful failings. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And I never, as incredible as my dad was, he and I never sat down and had these conversations. I just saw him as a man who just was successful and never failed. Whereas he, as an artist, knew he was failing all the time. He was always not hitting his own personal bar. Right. And so, but we never talked about that. We never talked about any of that stuff. It was too scary for me to talk to him about that, because then I was showing my vulnerability to the God, right? Like, this is, it was really complicated for me. So I just had to find my way through it. And the more I learned that the audience is on your side and they're rooting for you, and that you survive it and you learn and it's no big deal, that I learned that it is a dance, that it really is an invitation. And the only way we're ever going to get out of our own way is to leap before we look. I mean, it really is. Yeah. So, and that's one of those moments we were talking about earlier, where the creative thing, like I have an idea, like the line "perfectionism kills" came to me, and I sat down and that shit just started pouring out of me. And those essays I did for my podcast at that time, I would just come up with an idea, and a little bit of a haunting thing would first couple of lines or something like that. But then I would sit down and boom, it would just come out of me. And I'm very lucky that way, that I get to write that way sometimes. Sometimes my first draft is my best draft. I clean it up, but I just get out of my way is what I do.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's like one of the best feelings when something like that comes out. I will stare at a thing in disbelief when I've done it well and I like it. I'm like,
Yeah.
who did this? Like,
Yeah.
it's such a weird,
And
it's such a weird feeling.
It is us, and it's like, but it's us plus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think our self-identity, that's the one that's questioning it. Our normal ego self-identity is going, who wrote that?
Right, exactly. Where I'm like, that couldn't have been somebody step in.
We're bigger than that. We're,
Yeah.
you know, not in a hubris ego way. We're wider than that. We're deeper than that. We are part of a conversation with life with a capital L.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as a Jungian, you know, I look at the world through the lens of, you know, knowing that there's a collective unconscious. We also share kind of these fields of thought. You know, Elizabeth Gilbert tells this great story about having this idea for this novel about a pharmaceutical company, and it's about South America, and it's about an affair between two people in the company and all this kind of stuff. And she like has notes and she goes for it for a while, and then it just kind of, she turns to another project and she works on something else and she turns back to it, and she can feel it's gone. The energy's gone. It's not there anymore. So she ends up becoming friends with Ann Patchett like 5 years later, and they talk for the first time. And she says, well, what are you working on? And Ann describes this novel about a pharmaceutical company in South America and an affair between two executives.
Wow.
And Elizabeth Gilbert's like, what? Wait, are you fucking shitting me? Like, no one knew about this project.
Right.
What are you talking about? And Elizabeth Gilbert's like, she really believes. And you know, and it's not magical thinking, believing, but it's about understanding that there are ideas and they're looking for portals. They are looking to be like, there's stuff in the collective unconscious just souping around, looking for some consciousness to connect to, you know? And it's like, oh, I'm open. Hello, come here.
Yeah. And,
you know, so I don't understand it all, but there is this dance, this conversation. There's this great poet named David Whyte, Whyte. He's a Welsh poet. And he talks about this conversation, having the conversation of life and having it with non-human ego things like the tree, you know, or, you know, whatever it is, nature or just whatever, and or creativity. You know, that's why the Greeks talked about the muses.
Oh,
They saw them as these entities that like had this way of shepherding things towards you, because this is a human experience. Now, Jung explained it as collective unconscious and things like that. There's probably 20 different ways to explain it, but it's about trying to understand this weird human experience we have with this stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's a shame when you think of how much that escapes people because they're too busy, you know, working jobs they hate, not paying attention to the surroundings. Like, I always think about how many creatives wind up dying in like just terrible jobs or family, you know, whatever, because we're not given the freedom to do, you know, what we need to be done. That was the thing that was so kind of odd about the pandemic and everything like that. It just, I enjoyed seeing what people did with the time for the most part, except for the ones protesting outside of a Fuddruckers to go open. Like, I understand what they did with their time. You're like, those closed in 97. Relax. But
it's never opening again.
Right. Yeah. Those are gone. Yeah. But yeah, it was cool to see what people actually wound up doing and what, you know, what things they came up with in crunch time too. What actually, and this is kind of, you know, it doesn't sound great, but like watching comedy club owners, kind of the ones that are just shitty, but like watching those things fold because they don't have the creative people to back it up, and watching us kind of thrive because we're like, well, we're the ones who have this content and we're willing to produce it. So we bought equipment and, you know, did what we could with the time. That kind of made me value what we do even more, or maybe even like coming out of it, I was like, I'm not going to do A, B, C, and D anymore because, you know, it just gave me a different perspective on it. You know? Yeah.
I think a lot of people have used this time to reinvent themselves. And, you know, it's really interesting. Like the restaurant workers, a lot of people went and trained themselves to get better jobs. And that's why restaurants are really hurting, because
these people went off and actually had enough time to get and use their unemployment money and use the rescue money to retrain themselves and re-educate themselves. Imagine investing in people like that.
Exactly. And I love seeing it too. I mean, I know people get frustrated because they're like, I can't go to my favorite restaurant anymore. And I'm like, well, fucking guess you should have paid them more or give, fought for them to get more money or whatever it is, because it's a shame. So you mentioned Paul Provenza, and you produced one of my all-time favorite shows on stand-ups.
Me too.
And just stand-up. The Green Room, I have asked him when it's coming back.
We would love to know. I'm always tweeting, hey, Netflix, hey, Showtime, hey, guys, who's going to pick this up? Because who wouldn't? I mean, it's not like it takes a gazillion freaking dollars to make this show. And, it's the best conversation about comedy ever.
Absolutely.
And it's entertaining and it's informative. We were just watching, I was turning people on to young Bo Burnham because everyone's freaking out about his new special. And I'm like, we had him on
episode 1.
We had him on the Green Room.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was season 2.
Season 2, episode 1 or
episode
2?
1. It was with Gary Shandling, Judd, Mark Maron, and Ray Romano.
And Judd Apatow,
And it was just this, and then there's young Bo who's like, who are you guys again? Who are you guys? It's just such a great moment.
And then Gary goes, it's so mutual.
Well, but then Gary really does a Gary thing because Gary became a mentor of mine. Really a beautiful friendship we had. He did that thing that Gary did so well, which he looked him in the eye and just was like, you're authentic. You're just showing up as you. And that's what I'm at my age, always peeling the onion on. Like, you're already there. Mm-hmm. Like, go forth, young man, and be authentic. It was just a beautiful, beautiful mentoring moment there. Yeah.
I love Gary Shandling. The relationship that Gary had with your dad, I thought was amazing too. And that again just proves just how nice your dad is, because Gary just drove with a bunch of material and your dad was like,
a great story. Yeah. I don't use other people's material, but I'll read it. And the funny thing is he says, can you come back tomorrow? And Gary had just driven 2 hours and had to drive 2 hours back. And he's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
I know.
Gets there
it's so great.
Day. Yeah.
But Gary, that episode is one of my favorite episodes of all time because everybody's super fucking sharp. They're and Bo's on there, so he's the younger generation representing. But God, just everybody going back and forth, just all the greatest comics. But I loved their conversation about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your thoughts on this are, especially because of your dad, just because I feel like the earlier generations that your dad was a part of, and even before him, did they not deal with that as much? Because I feel like that's a neurosis and kind of a neurotic thing.
It's such a great question. And I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I would have loved to have asked my dad. I think he did at times. He did struggle. He did. It's funny. There's a story that my dad's manager, Jerry Hamza, tells about us taping Carlin at Carnegie. Mm-hmm. And which I think is just a great special from moment one. And we couldn't do a safety show because the unions were so bad. And we had like 3 hours to set up. And it was a lot of money. And HBO was like, we're not going to spend 2 nights doing that. And so my dad had one shot to get it. And my dad walked off the stage and burst into tears in the dressing room because he didn't think he'd nailed it. Wow. He thought he had really fucked it up. And so there you have it.
Yeah, that basically answers the question. That's crazy though. I did not know that they didn't do a second, because I think that special's flawless.
I agree. Yeah. But once again, his standards very high. Right. I mean, really high, incredibly high. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I mean, I wonder if imposter syndrome is just getting worse in the culture in general, just because. Yeah, it's interesting. The biggest thing, I work with women all the time, and I'm a life coach for women, and imposter syndrome is one of the, usually like 8 out of 10 women I work with, they have it. They mention it in the first call.
with them, and perfectionism, and they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
They really go hand in hand. And because the imposter syndrome is, well, who am I?
Right.
Who am I to do this? And it's like, yeah, but you know, the weird thing about that is that, well, who aren't you? Like, no one was born. I mean, if you really think, well, I am the one, then you probably have like a personality disorder. Like you're Donald Trump or something, because
Right.
you have this kind of prophetic, like, you know, narcissistic, I am this fucking center of the universe kind of personality disorder.
Right.
And so we're, you know, I think that who am I is like we talked about it earlier, is a good natural humbling.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when that voice gets too loud and it's the only voice running the show, then yeah, you're paralyzed and you're stuck, because
right.
who am I really to do this? And the reality is that every single person had to learn how to do what they're an expert at. So whoever you see, yeah, there's some natural talent involved, maybe, or a natural gift, but there's a ton of craft involved also.
Sure.
A huge amount of craft in any field you go into. Mm-hmm. You know, you may be a whiz kid at 20, a tennis thing or this or that or whatever, but you know, if you want to stay the long haul, if you want to be successful in the long run, if you want to be all of that, you need to know how to pivot, know how to change, know how to evolve, you know, learn new skills, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I need to write about that a little bit more, because it is a really fascinating thing, and it is a dance partner with perfectionism for sure.
Yeah, when you said that, I realized the same. You're absolutely right. It totally is. They go hand in hand, and it's frustrating too, I think, because I feel like it may be more. Like I think about that all the time, because I always think about the impact social media winds up having on everybody.
Yeah,
I mean,
think it's
Yeah, and the internet's what, like 40 years old? I mean, that's still a baby in its existence, so we have no idea what the effects of it are going to be. But it's always like even within people we know personally, like family members that are like, I always find it weird that like a grandparent has social media and then follows their granddaughter, because I'm like, there is shit you are not meant to see.
Yeah.
And there's also like, I think the way we get along, even in family settings, sometimes is based on assumption. Your grandparents are assuming you're a certain way.
You're a good kid.
Yes.
And
they like you.
Yeah. And you're assuming that your grandfather wasn't a prick at work.
Exactly. And then as soon as you have social media, you're like, I don't think I like them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It is that whole exposure thing and that whole TMI. Mm-hmm. It's all TMI. The fucking internet is TMI, man.
God, we are not meant. It's so funny to me. We're not meant.
We're literally not wired for it, and we are overwhelmed. I'm convinced that more than just being over 50, you know, most of my friends are over 50. Mm-hmm. That because it's getting younger and younger, is people are forgetting like the names of people and words and, you know, things. I was like, I was sharp, man. I was a sharp person. I had a steel trap brain and all of that kind of stuff. And I am a bag of fucking mush now. I'm like, I don't know. And so we now do a little thing when we're around our friends. We're like, okay, we're not looking it up. We're going to figure, there's 6 of us here. Oh. We're going to figure this out together. Damn it. All right. What else was she in? And we're like figuring out this actor's name.
Yes, I love that. We'll do that all the time where I'm like, no one touch a thing.
No, we're not looking. Damn it.
And then you finally remember it's like Shirley MacLaine and your head bounces off the desk. It's the last thing you remember that night.
Yep. Yep.
Oh man. Yeah, it's insane. And I did that the other day. I was going somewhere and I had it on the GPS and I went to the wrong place because there were 2 of them. And I just kept, and it was, my friend was just like, but didn't you notice the landmarks and where you were driving? And I was like, no. I just looked at this.
Part of my brain is gone. It's shut off. I wasn't landmark driving. Landmark driving's different. GPS driving is tell me when to turn. I'm turning in 50 feet. I'm turning in 50 feet.
Yes,
landmark driving is, where's that 7-Eleven again? Oh, there's the 7-Eleven. I see it up ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
landmark. That's fucking hilarious. I love that. I never thought I called it that before, but that is so true. Yeah, I just follow the thing, and then my brain gets to think about all dumb shit, nothing important, and then And then I wind up where I'm supposed to be.
I was so against GPSs at the front. I remember at the beginning of GPS, I would get into friends' cars and they'd be like, "Oh, let me put it in the GPS." And I'm like, "What? You can't remember how to get to the, And I was like, a Thomas guide person in LA. And I was always the kid who read the maps. I was an only kid. So I read the maps when we were on the road with my dad and stuff like that. So I was like, a great map reader and all of that. And really prided myself in it. And now I'm like, we get in the car, I drive my husband crazy. I'm like, I'm getting on Waze. Waze will tell us the fastest way to get there.
Yep. Waze is amazing.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm going on Waze. Sorry, I'm going on Waze. I've completely surrendered that whole part of my personality to this device who will just get me there quicker because I live in LA and I fucking don't care anymore.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember being terrified. The only time I was terrified of Waze was when I moved out to LA and I was going to the Comedy Store and I was like, I'm going to use Waze. And it took me through the fucking hills. And I was driving through neighborhoods, careening down fucking streets. And I was like, I'm going to die up here. I don't know where I am. And like rich people were looking at me disgusting. Cause I'm
going to die in Beverly Hills.
I was just like, because it took me up all the way up to get around and then come down.
I thought you were going to say Compton or something of that nature. You're like,
he was like in Coldwater Canyon or something.
But I thought I was going to fall off the mountain.
Yeah,
like I didn't know if there were railings.
And that's the thing too, is back in the day, 35 years ago, us locals, we knew all the shortcuts.
Right.
And, and my friend even wrote a book called Shortcuts. And then the traffic got so bad that, even starting 20 years ago, it's like, there's no more shortcuts. Everyone knows fucking to take cold water and everyone knows to do all that stuff. And now it's like, fucking Waze, you can tell when you're in the little line of Waze people because you're like, oh, we're all taking a right on this obscure street to get from LAX to Beverly Hills. No one else would ever take a right on this street, but 4 of us are because we're all on Waze together.
Yeah. It's like when it says that there's a cop up ahead and like 16 cars in front of you all slow down. And it's like, okay. All right.
Still there. Doing my job. I'm feeding the collective.
I love ratting on cops that are on Waze. That is my favorite. Sometimes I would be on my bike around my neighborhood. I would just be like, you're welcome, citizens.
That's right. I'm doing my duty.
Exactly.
Exactly. The rebel forces.
Yeah.
I am part of the rebellion. On Waze,
oh my God.
Using this Google activated, spy device that's following me. But I'm a member of the rebellion.
Oh my God. I know. There's so much shit that I love that people think that getting vaccinated means they're getting tracked. And it's just that kills me. That kills me. I'm like, you're typing on something. I mean, everybody says it, but it's
meanwhile, when you get into your car, your phone's like, you're 8 minutes from home.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. That's exactly where I'm going.
I had a great thought the other day. I'm going to share it with you guys. I haven't written about this yet, but of course I sent it to myself so I could remember it.
Nice.
And this is my definition of liberty now, because it was the 4th of July. It was that kind of a weekend. So my definition of liberty in America is the freedom to fuck it up for everyone else. Pretty much what liberty is, right?
That's so great.
Then I thought about it. I'm like, okay, well, so then if that's the definition of liberty, what would be the definition of equality? And the definition of equality is, and this is rough, I'm just rough drafting it here, is that everyone gets the same chance to fuck it up for everyone else. That's the true definition of equality. We all get the same chance to fuck it up for everyone else. And then justice, I'm still working on justice. The definition of justice is that everyone gets a chance to stop the person who's fucking it up for everyone else.
Oh, that's fucking beautiful. I love it. That's so true. God damn. Yeah.
So
I'm
crazy.
I'm gonna be thinking about that for like days now.
Yeah. Now he's gonna screenshot that. No, I'm just kidding.
and not give you the quote for it.
He's gonna do what other people do to him.
All of a sudden you see me, I'm wearing it on a t-shirt. I'm like,
wearing a t-shirt. I'm like, what the fuck?
Is that my face?
Yeah, what?
It's cut out of the interview later, mysteriously. There's like just a block missing. Like, wow, that looks like it was poorly edited. What happened there? Kelly said something brilliant, and I took it.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I don't know. She froze. She froze. I don't know what happened.
I just replace it with an out of thought clip from Ed Asner from earlier,
talking about aliens.
Yeah, or telling Mike Farrell they can go fuck himself. I told him, Mike Farrell. I interviewed Mike Farrell on the show. I said, Mike Farrell said to say hello and he loves you and you're a good guy, and he just goes, fuck him. What happened? It's hilarious. Oh my god, I know, it was just too good. So I've kept you. So I said I would keep you for an hour. I don't know if you have a hard out, but we can keep going, or I could let you go.
I'm gonna. My husband and I are gonna eat some dinner soon. So
awesome. Well, then let me ask you this. I ask everybody this before they go. If you had one piece of advice you could tell your younger self now, what would it be?
Don't marry Andrew.
All right. I don't know what that means, but
read my book. Read my book.
I absolutely will. Don't marry Andrew. That I'm putting on a t-shirt. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a blast talking to you. I'm so happy to meet you.
Yes,
thank you guys for having me. It was an absolute blast to be here, and really great fun conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Dystopia tonight.